All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to call this meeting to order. Today, we're going to conduct our workshop for Monday, August the 16th. We're going to talk about some budget issues, and I'll just remind everybody the tenor of the workshop is, in terms of conversational with the commissioners, it's more of an open forum to ask questions of the presenters as we go through this, and then we'll also have time for public comment. So with that, I'm going to call this meeting to order and ask that you join us in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And please join us in a moment of silence as we, of course, always think and worry and pray about all of our first responders here in Flagler County and the great men and women of our Flagler County Sheriff's Department and all the other police departments that keep us safe here in Flagler County. And we can never forget the brave men and women of the United States military that keep us safe both here and abroad. Okay, thank you, everyone. So as I said, we're going to convene our workshop here, and the sole purpose of this workshop today is to discuss further our working towards our 2021-2022 budget. And I believe staff, we're going to kick off some conversation here. So Mr. Brower or Ms. Petito, did you have a new handout for us?
It's coming.
Okay. Okay.
I believe we'll start with John.
Is this handout match what we're seeing on the screen here? Okay. Doesn't sound like that's on, Mr. Brower.
Test, okay. Oh, there you go. Sticky button. John Brower, Financial Services. Mr. Chair, this is our second meeting. First one was last week, is an extension of that meeting to bring back some millage scenarios that we discussed, not only in that meeting, but subsequent to that meeting. The first slide here, and we just have some quick slides to go over. The first slide is what's in the tentative budget right now with our flat millage. That's the total millage, including all debt service millages and other voter-approved millages. But it's also maintaining the general fund millage of 8.1297 for our operating. That brings in new revenue of just shy of $7 million, and we split them out, as you can see. For on the left side there, the BOCC gets $4.2 million of that based on the pro rata share. New revenue for the sheriffs, a little over $2 million, and it goes from there around the bubbles there. The first scenario that we're bringing to you, showing the 0.1 mil reduction, and that would bring in $5.9 million. And that would bring in new revenue for the board of $3.5 million. For the sheriff, he goes to $1.7 million. And you see off on the right-hand side there, our $619,000 is what would be the board impact for if, the same pro rata share with the 1/10 reduction. And we would likely forego 2 positions and a reduction in capital equipment and capital improvements as well. This third scenario is the same as the previous, except for the highlighted $400,000 one-time enhancement that we referred to last week for the sheriff for a piece of equipment I believe he's wanting to order. So it's the same dollar amounts all around, just with an additional one-time enhancement of $400,000 for the sheriff. This slide, to me, says a lot. You can see down in 2007, before or as the economic downturn was coming, we had a property valuation in the county of over $12.1 billion and a population of 90,000. Inclusive of the tax year 2021, which is the one we're using for the next fiscal year budget, we still haven't reached the level of property valuations that we had in 2007. Yet we have about 24% increase in population. and we're still about 12% below the high of 2007 in the tax year valuations.
Could I ask a question just quick?
Yes, sir.
What were the millage rates in those two times?
4.7716 was the general fund millage down in 2007 for tax year. So again, 24% population increase, and we're still down 12% in our property valuations from the high in the tax year 2007. So when I started here a couple years ago, Mr. Cameron, we were in a lot different situation than we are now. Fund balance was about $6 million. We were taking tax anticipation notes each year for cash flow purposes, which just taking those out, just issuance cost alone is about $60,000 to the county. We were deferring maintenance because we needed to. Deferred capital equipment, deferring infrastructure needs, not funding needed positions to maintain service levels. And lenders were concerned about all this and giving us phone calls because they were concerned how all this was going to affect our debt and our capacity and all the rules we have to follow for our debt. So we, and Mr. Cameron, I guess, installed the three-legged stool model, and we kind of have a little picture of it there, and it includes building the reserves, reducing our debt, and the millage rate being more sustainable over the long term. So for phase one, to increase our reserves, we went, currently going into fiscal year 2022, we went from $6 million, I mentioned earlier, to around $25 million. We've paid off or gotten rid of about $20 million in debt, and that's inclusive of getting rid of utilities, those type of things. Improved our processes and procedures, including capital improvement program. Just we've created a plan, and we're working that plan, and we're about maybe halfway through now. Phase two is what we're in right now. And the deferred maintenance that we had in the past, because we didn't have the money or because we were trying to build up our fund balance. Oops, I thought someone called me. Now we're able to start doing those things. We have our fund balance, we have some cash. We can start reinstituting, building our critical infrastructure moving forward, including deferred maintenance, new projects, rolling stock, those types of things. The phase three, which when we're building the plan, working the plan, was thought to be next year. The first phase, the first part of that phase three, which would be the reduce that millage. Currently, we have in our unfunded CIP, we have $30 million or so of projects we've identified, including $2.1 million of capital preservation. That's just keeping what we have in working shape. Rolling stock, we have about $1 million in the general fund right now. What we really needed was 1.3. Next year, we needed 1.7, 2 million, and so forth. You can see it's increasing every year, and we just have to maintain what we can to keep up. We have vehicles that are over 10 years old, still on the street, a lot of miles. So that shows a total of $41 million just in the CIP and rolling stock. These might be familiar to you. If you remember back in April, Ms. Petito and I gave a presentation about our financial overview and what we saw, what we needed moving forward. And this was the law enforcement portion of that. We have a couple slides to follow, and I'll just go real quickly over this. But over the next 5 years, we're looking at $31.6 million for law enforcement needs. Fire rescue, we talked about those and the stations and the current condition of the stations and new stations. So it's another $31 million. And the library, we're currently working on building a new library, and that's going to need to be staffed. Those folks I mentioned last week, about $600,000 we expect when that opens, and that's all new money, recurring expenditures. And that's over the next 5 years, $12.2 million. Did you want to take up this?
We also wanted to touch on some of the administrative future needs for staffing, and we had gone over this again in April. With the new growth, you have a need for additional services. This slide here shows you the needs that we're going to experience over the next 5 years, whether it be adds to staff in the IT department, additional folks working in human resources. I know our Health and Human Services is in great need. They've got a total of 9 positions there. And something that we've touched on before, when you bring on additional facilities, right now we're maintaining over 1 million square feet of county facilities, but yet we haven't thought about or added anybody to maintain the new Sheriff's Operations Center or the library that should be coming on board. So you see some additions there with the maintenance staff. We've added parks, however, we have not added any park staff over the years. And again, you've got 2 additions to the fleet for the mechanics. And again, that's in support of providing service with the sheriff. When we took on the maintenance for the sheriff's fleet, we absorbed his 3 employees. Currently, in talking to our fleet manager, the sheriff equates to probably about 50 to 60% of the work coming out of fleet, yet we've not added any additional staff. So you see that in there as well. So looking at that 5-year total across the board, it's roughly $7.9 million over the next 5 years.
All right, so all that together, with the previous slides, over $107 million that we've identified over the next 5 years of needs. Understanding, it would be great to be able to fund all those, but of course we understand that that may not be possible. However, it's about chipping away at what you need to and making positive gains on what you need.
And then we just wanted to touch on why the property valuations have increased, and largely, I think it's in correlation with supply and demand. Right now, we've got a low supply of homes for sale being met by a strong buyer demand. As we have more and more people moving here, our inventory is getting lower and lower. You see, in talking to folks in real estate, it's getting to a point where they're bidding again, where it's a competition and people are bidding above the the asking price of homes. But not only are home prices increasing, but there's other economic factors that result in increases to what we're doing. It's part of inflation. We're seeing increases in expenses for not just our labor, but materials, supplies, fuel, insurance, things like that, where we're seeing those increases. And then along with the increase for demands in services, because we've got this population increase. I know we have coming up at a future workshop talk about impact fees. We've had a moratorium on those impact fees for a number of years, and we're looking to implement some updated phased approach to reinstituting those impact fees. And typically that's what pays for growth. We don't have anything in place right now that's really helping us pay for that growth. And this would be, even if we opted to put in impact fees over a phased approach, it wouldn't go into effect until January. It would take a couple of years before you're really seeing an impact with those being able to be used. So this property value increase provides us an ability to support some of that growth demands that we see. And what staff was recommending was to continue the implementation of a strategic plan. I think that the financial strategic plan allows us to grow our way out of the financial crisis that we were once in. If we prematurely reduce the millage, it'll compromise our ability to fulfill that plan and will lead to a longer recovery. We're asking that we maintain a pro rata share approach, making progress on the many years of deferred maintenance and deferred infrastructure support. This would allow us to build capacity to fund additional personnel that we know that we have coming forward, whether it be the firefighters through the SAFER grant, the additions to the library, or some of those additional support staff needs that we talked about earlier. And as John had mentioned earlier, the plan had always been to do a reduction in millage next year. Again, because if we prematurely do it, the timing will be off, and our ability to fulfill that plan will take a little bit of a longer recovery. I do think that collectively, we have come up with a plan that will meet with the sheriff's needs without changing the pro rata share moving forward, and that distribution. We should know more over the next few weeks, whether it be the phasing in of some of his needs, along with some alternative funding that we've identified.
I had a couple of pushbacks.
Sure.
One on impact fees, the way we're looking at them would in no way be enough to pay for the additional demand on services that we have, because they're just not at that level.
Correct.
And we haven't been accumulating them over time. So, you know, some of the ways that you pay for growth is exactly what we're seeing, which is an increase, obviously, in valuations and additional values on the books from new construction over time. So it's a combination of that, and I think, and the impact fees, not just that, in my view. And when I think, were formulating the budget early on, I think we were looking at about a 5% growth rate in valuations, and now we're at 9%. So that, I think that's some of maybe the thought process of a reduction in millage, because of giving some of that back. And, you know, and I think that's a little different than saying that we planned all along to not want, you know, we had a strategic financial plan not to want to decrease the millage for another year as we got further along and making progress on all these great things that you all are doing. But I think, in my mind, I think that the thought process there was that was at a 5% growth rate, or projected, and not 9%, where we're at. So.
Just in the beginning here, just a couple of points. You can probably hear me today because I moved the microphone to the correct side. I agree with what you said, and just a couple of, and I know this is like Budget 101, but the reason I asked that question about the millage rate, we all know that the highest the millage rate can go is 10%. And you always want to leave some leeway for bad times, because in bad times, you may well have to increase the millage rate in order to just cover expenses. So I think that millage rate is something we should watch very closely. And if there's any way we can reduce it at all, and at least keep it flat, but reduce it some, is also a hedge for the future, when we may have to increase the millage rate in order to cover if we have another recession or something like that. So I think it's a two-edged sword. So I think we have to consider this very carefully. I noticed that even if we were to reduce the millage rate by 1/10 of 1 mil, we're adding 400,000. If that were to happen, we would add 400,000 to the sheriff's budget. And maybe somebody could tell me a little bit more about what that's just 400,000, I guess, out of reserves to cover the purchase of a vehicle. So to a degree, we have reserves, and it looks like everything you've presented to us is good stuff that we want, but we are also slightly increasing reserves. So back to our chairman's point, I don't think there are going to be a lot of years when we go 9.2% increase in valuations. And in any, so I don't think we can depend, based on what you say the future costs are going to be, I don't see us looking forward to those kind of numbers in the coming years. I might be wrong, but so my feeling is that, as what I said at the last meeting, in general, I think the people see that their property taxes will go up. They won't go up as much for our homestead exemption people as some of our businesses and new owners, but they're still going to go up 3%, even if they are homestead exempted. And a lot of people probably haven't seen their salaries go up that much, or their business make that much more business. So I was, the last thing we did at the last meeting was to talk about a 1/10 of 1 mil decrease. You've given us the information. I agree with the information you provided. So I guess I mean, if we want to do anything like this and still keep the sheriff it's an increase no matter what, but keep them somewhat whole. I still think we ought to try and go for a 1/10 of 1 mil drop and maybe use reserves to cover it for this year.
Well, just on the other side of that, devil's advocate side, we've got problems. We know we have problems with deferred maintenance in the vehicle program, as they've showed us. And this is an opportunity not to get well, but it's an opportunity to get better. And I think I'll use your argument that this would be a good reason not to reduce, because in the future, we may not have the amount of money that we do today to fix some of
But
this
the only fix for that is increase the millage rate.
up to 10, yeah.
We don't want
We
to
don't wanna do
approach
that.
10.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Well, and there's a reason why we were at 4.71 and now we're in the eights, is because as the valuations came down, the millage rate had to go up.
Millage rate went up, exactly.
That kind of proves my argument,
Exactly.
though.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah.
So that was the argument. I think our staff has given us reasons not to do that. So the only place I see where there's any slack is probably in how fast you build the reserves up, which is also a hedge against the future.
Yeah, what's the impact, John, on the average citizen in Flagler County of a 0.1 mil reduction? What's the impact?
$20.
$20,
If
yeah.
using a $200,000 taxable value home.
Is that if he has the...
$20.
If he has his homestead exemption?
Right, so taxable value of $200,000, that's, say, $250, you get the tax, off there.
I know that argument. It's the psychological impact of it also.
Right, well, that's true.
So I interrupted your presentation, so please continue, sorry. I did it.
We just had, I had him bring up that slide as he was talking about that 1/10 of a mil reduction, just so you could see what that looked like. But basically, that did conclude the presentation. As far as, again, it was staff's recommendation to continue to implement that strategic plan and just, keep to the plan. We've made great strides in implementing the first phase of it. We're currently in phase 2 of that plan. I would caution about prematurely pulling away or deviating from that, only because it would take us longer to recover and just put us a little bit further behind. So we would, I think if you can bring up that last slide, the one that says staff's recommendation would be to, again, just maintain the pro rata share as it has been over the last, this would be the 3rd year. It would give us an opportunity to help with some of that deferred maintenance and some of that infrastructure that's so necessary. And it would allow us to have some additional capacity. And I think to your point, when we had talked about that initial millage projection at 5%, we would need 5% just to maintain status quo. So that's why this advantage that you see here, it allows us to absorb some of that growth and provide us a little bit more stability and fund balance and reserves, as well as tackling a lot of that deferred stuff that had been deferred for approximately about 10 years.
I'm sorry, but the plan to reduce millage next year, based on what you've just told us, that the tail on what we're agreeing to now is going to be big in the future, and I don't think, my guess, this is all guessing about what's going to happen next year, but I have serious doubts that property values will, from where they are right now, will go up another 9%. I might be wrong, but this is the year we get the big jump in property values, and just think that if we can't reduce the millage rate even 1/10 of a point in a year when we have a lot of income coming in, then I really worry about when we'll ever be able to do that. And I do worry about the fact if we were to hit another recession, the higher the millage rate is now, the harder it will be to do much increasing to it in the future to cover a recession. So there's 2 ways to look at that. You build reserves, or you keep the millage rate down with some flexibility in that in the future.
I think that you'd see the benefit in having your reserves built, though, for when you do have that downturn and you still need to keep the lights on and you still need to operate and provide services. And I think that's where we were hit so bad during the downturn the last time, which led us to not having sufficient fund balance.
And the millage rate went from 4 point something to 8.
Correct.
Other questions, comments, commissioners? Jump in.
In looking at the, at the plan, right, there, the commission had this Phase 3 plan. Was that like agreed to at the beginning of Jerry's term? Was it voted on or just a consensus of that was what we were doing moving forward?
I mean, I recall it to be a consensus at a commission meeting. There was a presentation by Mr. Brower and Mr. Cameron, and we absolutely agreed
That was
to
the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's.
I don't remember when it was, but we certainly did that, yes. That might be helpful to send that to Commissioner Dance, too.
We can look that up,
Yeah.
definitely. We can look that up. It was through consensus at a board meeting, though.
Yeah.
It's hard. I know it's easy to say Phase 3 reduce millage. It's still, I just see 5 years still of increased needs down the road, but, so I mean, personally, I think you get a jump start on making some headway on millage. And I appreciate the numbers that staff put together and crunched on this. But that's where I'm leaning on all of this. I just think after looking at everything, Mr. Sullivan's made some good points. I'm anxious to hear again more from you four as to the plan that we've got in place and where we're at and moving forward.
Mr. Chairman, just for Commissioner Dance, we did, and I know he was there too, via Zoom, when the budget was being built. We had a lot of time to go through detail for each division of the staff and all that. So I do think that where we are now is kind of what we thought was coming. But I still make my other points. But it's not that we haven't been working it all this time. We have been, and most of us, I think, sat in or in person or via Zoom, and when we were actually doing the mechanics of each department presenting their budget and all that. So we're here, we are where we are. We've already done that. We've already said that we can't go higher on the millage rate than remaining it constant. So we're talking a pretty small area of decision-making that's left for us at this point.
I still think we should just hold the course. We should keep the millage rate the same and start fixing this stuff that we've been neglecting. And none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen next year or the year after or the year after that. But I'm assured with this incredible brain power of the five of us that we can solve it. We can fix the problem.
Maybe.
Yeah. And
Speak for
the
yourself,
incredible
sir.
staff, I'm not worried about this. I think we need to hold the course and keep trying to get ahead of some of this stuff, like the capital improvement stuff. And we got leaky roofs, we got problems. We got some problems we need to fix. I just think we should hold the course and deal with whatever comes up next year.
Anybody else? Well, we obviously cannot vote at this meeting. You're just trying to get a sense for where we're at, correct?
Correct. We're just really looking for some consensus among the board.
Doesn't sound like we've moved any further than a week ago.
I haven't heard from Mr. Commissioner Mullins. Is there any thoughts on your end down there?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that the 1/10 of reduction is only $20 per house. If we've got, and I'm just going to round numbers, if we've got 100,000 people, that means that's 200,000 decrease in taxes. I thought we were talking about 1 million.
Well, it's not, there's only 40-something households, properties. There's not 100,000.
I mean,
Yeah,
remember, you
that's
got the
what I'm
homestead exemption versus the people who don't get homestead exemption.
Yeah, to me, if it's that little bit of a reduction, I think we need to look at what we're going to cost staff and cost services. I mean, I'm concerned with what's going on in the West, the flooding. We've got a lot of infrastructure that has been neglected for decades. I'm concerned about our roads being, I mean, you know, one thing we got to realize as people move into this state, infrastructure is going to play a major, major role in the future. And if we don't have this infrastructure caught up, there's nobody in here that's going to be able to deter growth. None of us can stop growth. You just physically, your ability, you can't. You cannot stop growing. And if we continue at this rate with our infrastructure already out to date, then we're going to have some serious problems. Now, one thing, you know, I hadn't heard anybody mention things in the future that we need to also keep in mind. If we do our jobs right, we're going to have more industry in this area. If we do what we're, and when I say we, I mean staff, commission, everybody, the whole community. If we do our planning right, we'll be improving things partially in a very economic way. I mean, when I go and redo a company, when we redo a complex or a property or a shopping center, we don't try to do everything at once. We do them in phases and do them in projects so we don't overstress our budget. And, you know, we're going to be able to do that. So future, you know, we'll be okay. We're going to be fine. We'll be just as good as the next county over. But what we need to keep in mind is how much are we really reducing and saving, and what kind of stress are we putting on our staff, putting on our future growth, putting on our infrastructure, putting on our public safety, putting, you know, our fire department. That's very seriously need to be looked at. You know, we can't deny that for many decades, stuff wasn't done the way it was supposed to be done. We're here today, we're now moving forward, and I think we've got to keep all that in mind before we start fooling around with the numbers too much.
Mr. Chairman, I got to keep talking, I'm sorry. I understand that. That's a little bit of a gold watch approach to budget, what you're saying, though. And my point this year is this. We just had a 9.2% increase in property evaluations. We're taking in over $6 million more because of that. We also got ARP, the American Rescue Plan, kicking in another $22.5 million, half of which we have already received. If we can't reduce the millage rate by 1/10 of 1 mil in this kind of a year, I predict, based on what we hear about what's coming in the future, we will not ever be able to reduce the millage rate as far as I can see into the future. So I think that's where we are. If we have to keep it the same, then so be it. That's the way the board votes. But I just say, based on the fact of money that's out there, when we went to our Florida Association of Counties, one of the briefings, no matter what they were talking about, broadband or anything else, there's a lot of money out there right now. And if we as a county, even under those circumstances, can't do anything except keep the millage rate the same, then I think that's a sign that as we look into the future, there's almost no chance of us doing it in the future, for the near term, next 3 or 4 years.
I think Commissioner Sullivan summed my position up pretty much the same.
Yeah.
But again, if we don't go that direction and we want to stay at flat millage, I don't think that's the end of the world either. And I would be proud of that and support that. If that's, you know, I may not vote for it, but I would be on board to support that, because that's, you know, for for harmony, and that's the right thing for us to do because that's what our board decided. So I could live with it, you know, but I think in terms of describing the situation, Commissioner Sullivan, I couldn't have done it any better than the way he described it.
Well, if you're looking at consensus, I'm not voting for flat millage. So, I mean, so you can kind of formulate where three people are heading. So it's a matter of, you know, there's nothing magical in a tenth, but the tenth is what we came up with. It's about $1 million. But I agree. I mean, if you're not gonna cut it this year, then it's never gonna happen.
And I think one thing we've got to keep in mind, you know, I've said it, you don't do everything in your business. You can't turn all this around in 1 year or 2 years. There's a lot of stuff that's been going on for decades. But one thing we do need to keep in mind, the residents of Flagler County have had a tough year. I mean, it's not just one of us. It's everyone on this dais, everyone in this room has dealt with COVID in one way or another, personally or family. They've dealt with impacts in their businesses. They've dealt with impacts financially on their investments. So I think we have to keep that in mind when we look at this as well.
And I'll point out again that there is that extra $400,000 for the sheriff. If we do reduce it by 1/10 of 1 mil, that you did say there's a 400, I don't know where it's coming from, but it's coming from reserves or
We were
whatever.
planning on pulling
So
that.
the sheriff actually comes out of it about the same as if we had a flat rate. Is that right?
That's correct. We're going to bring that up. We were looking to pull that funding out of fund balance to fill that $400,000 gap.
Right, so the way it would look in the budget, Mr. Chair, is just like the negative 1/10 mil pro rata equally shared among everybody. And what I would like to do is during the carry forward process, increase the sheriff's budget $400,000 with the fund balance that we're bringing forward from this fiscal year.
I mean, you could take the money out of reserves and not tag anybody.
I like that.
Any other discussion?
Just a final comment. I'm just concerned about the future, and I'd hate to reduce a mill this year and add 0.2 next year. So I just,
I think all good logical points. Don't, those are right. So, so I don't know that,
I think based on the comments that we've received, we're looking at a 1/10 of a mil reduction evenly distributed with a one-time $400,000 enhancement to the sheriff to supplement that capital equipment cost. It's what it sounds like from the board.
I want to reiterate, though, not just staff, this is across the board, because last time there was a little confusion, and I think we all feel it needs to be spread out. Well, at least I do.
the only other can of worms I would open, for not now, but for the future after we're done with this cycle, is I really want to have a more in-depth discussion on this, the allocation method that we're using, I've used the last 2-3 years, whatever it is. Just need more education on it, more history, and really want to dig into that and understand it. So, but again, not now.
Certainly.
And if we have to, we don't have to do that at a, I mean, we can do that with individual commissioner meetings if you want. I just, saying for my edification, I would like that. So, all right. Any other discussion, commissioners? All right, we'll open it up for public comment. Anyone from the public wish to come forward and comment on our discussions?
Until first, I have a question for the chair. Is this the final budget workshop, or is there going to be another one?
I believe at this point, it's our final workshop.
Okay.
And then after this, we move into the actual
Okay, first and
budget
second
hearings.
reading of the
Right.
budget.
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a few comments here, and One of them is, if we have, this was a gold mine as far as real estate all over Florida. If we don't reduce the millage now and show we've got all this extra money, it makes us look extremely greedy. Well, oh, we got this, all this extra, we're going to keep it. What concerns me down the road, and I like Dave Sullivan's approach, keep the millage as low as you can, because once you get up to that 10 mil cap, just look at some other counties like Dade County, where I came from. What happens? You start creating special taxing districts for what used to be ordinary services. And I certainly don't want to see that happen here in Flagler County. The second thing is, as far as the sheriff's budget, I'm doing a lot of studying here, and I really have, I know 2 minutes is not going to go through with it. We have here a 10% increase in population in the past. We've gone from 110,000 to 120,000 in 10 years. The sheriff's overall budget is asking for a 40% increase. Okay, the median age in Flagler County is now 52 years old. We're a very low-crime county. Crime has gone down. I do not see why we have 4 facets in law enforcement, and I'm going to do a complete study before the final budget hearing. We have law enforcement, inmate facility, communication, and courthouse security. There are 4 divisions of the sheriff's budget, and I'm going to analyze everything because I think the sheriff has far too many employees that could be out as deputies on the road. We do not need this mega monster $23 million building. We don't have people working behind desks 24/7. The sheriff is an elected official. He could be gone the next election. Why do we need to be indebted with a $23 million mega building when right now we have Bunnell asking to put up a little tent for their officers? Now, you know, we have one value for Bunnell and another value for us. I think what the sheriff's attitude has been disgraceful. He has no money for masks. He doesn't treat the people in jail correctly. He wants money, 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 and we don't have any right to question his money because he's a constitutional officer. But I assure you, with the budget hearings, I'm going to bring all the statistics, if not before, to try to prove to you that the sheriff shouldn't get one damn dime more than he got last year, which was too much to begin with in the first place. His guys do all the work. He does the show work.
Anybody else from the public wish to come forward? All right, seeing no one else come forward, we'll close public comment. Entertain a motion to adjourn unless there's
Move we
anything
adjourn.
else.
Second.
All right, we're adjourned.